We're in the heart of Rogers Park. I'm Michael James. I'm your host for this morning's edition of Live from the Heartland Radio, brought to you every Saturday morning on WLUW 88.7, Chicago's Sound Alliance. And I am honored to have my friend, my comrade, Joe Moore of the 49th Ward. He is the alderman of the 49th Ward.
Good morning, Michael.
Joe, it's great to have you here. I get to see you pretty often these days, and it's there's a lot going on in our ward. It's we love our ward. You love our ward, and
it's a great ward.
You got
great
some
community.
new stuff happening. You got this participatory budget process. Apparently, it's the only place in the city that's doing it. One of the few in the country. It's unique and it's new. Tell us what this is all about.
Well, not only is it the only place in the city, it's really the only place in the United States that we're doing it, right here in the 49th Ward. What participatory budgeting is essentially is taking a portion of a government budget, in this case the city budget, and allowing the residents of that community, here in this case the 49th Ward, to actually directly vote on how the money's being spent. Each alderman in the city of Chicago gets a little over $1 million to spend at their discretion for ward improvements, for infrastructure projects like streets, alleys, sidewalks, and the like the sidewalk in front of the Heartland Cafe that was just done. And,
hallelujah. It took a little while, but it looks good. We were walking through earth, which was kind of nice for a while.
The ultimate permeable sidewalk. In any event, and we've had this money. It's called the Aldermanic Menu. It started back in the early 90s when a bunch of us were complaining about the fact that there wasn't enough capital dollars, infrastructure dollars spent in city neighborhoods. And so as a result of that criticism, the mayor launched a aldermanic menu where each alderman would get over $1 million to spend at their discretion. Well, I have tried to be very fair and even-handed in how the money's being distributed. But I heard a couple years ago about this concept called participatory budgeting. It started in São Paulo, Brazil, back in the late 80s. And was very successful, where they took on a portion of the São Paulo municipal budget and allowed the residents of that city to determine how it was being spent. And it spread to other parts of South America, Argentina, to Europe, Spain, Great Britain. They've even tried it in the public housing in Toronto, Canada, but never in the United States. And there were a couple of folks who were trying to interest some local elected officials in trying it here in the United States, and I stepped up to the plate and said, we'll give it a try. It sounds like it's something that really fits well with Rogers Park and the 49th Ward and the desire of people to be involved in determining the destiny of their community. And so about last spring, I formed a steering committee of representatives from all the major community organizations in the neighborhood, block clubs, churches, schools, any organization that represented a constituency in my ward, and together they came up with a process for putting this participatory budgeting in place, and we are now in the process of implementing it. We have had neighborhood assemblies. We've divided the ward up into 8 areas, and we've had meetings in each of those areas where people come, learn about what participatory budgeting is all about, learn about what the aldermanic menu is all about, and then come together and begin to brainstorm about how they would like to spend the money. They elect representatives who will then meet over the course of the winter, come up with some proposals, bring it back to the community. Ultimately, in April, we're going to have a community-wide plebiscite, a time when everyone comes together and the people will vote on which projects they want funded for 2010.
Have there been any stories on this? Has there been any publicity? Have you gotten any press on it or in the so-called major papers?
We've got a lot of interest among some of the blogs and some of the electronic news media, but Pam Zeckman, of all people, she's the investigatory reporter for Channel 2, talked to me about it just the other day. She's been doing a series of investigative reports about how aldermen are spending their infrastructure dollars, their menu money. And there's been a lot of criticism in other wards that the aldermen aren't listening to the people. And I think she's got a story coming up about an alderman who used some of the money to resurface the street in front of his home and put a cul-de-sac on his block. And so
In Chicago.
So I mentioned to her what we were doing, and she interviewed me on it. And, it really is the opposite of what usually goes on in Chicago. Totally transparent, involving the community. And, in fact, I'm not going to have the power to determine how this money's being spent. I'm turning it over to my constituents, the people who live in my ward, and they're going to vote on it.
Was Joe Moore, were there any, you mentioned Pan Zeckman and this one alderman and some challenges. I guess what I want to know, in the past, since Daley allowed aldermen to have $1 million discretionary money to spend on infrastructure in their ward, have there ever been community challenges that you know of in other wards to that process or how that money gets used?
No. And, in fact, there weren't really any challenges in the 49th Ward either. I did this on my own volition. I think most people have been pretty satisfied with how I've been spending that money to the extent they even know about it. But I just felt it was important to get people involved. First of all, I think it benefits the alderman. I think it benefits me because one of the things that is really challenging in this job, particularly now when money's tight and budgets are short, is that you can't give everybody everything they want. And you have to make tough decisions. You have to make tough calls. You have to make trade-offs. Here, this is a way of educating the public, educating my constituents about what are the tough choices that you have to make when you come up with tight budgets, and what priorities do you have to put into place. And so it gives folks, it empowers people to make those kind of decisions and to understand exactly the limitations that those of us in public office are operating under.
Joe Moore, Alderman of the 49th Ward. This is clearly a forward-thinking move on your part to initiate this process. I'm wondering what your take would be at a time when we have supposedly more progressive aldermen than we've had in the past. Are there other aldermen who are looking at this process, and do you think there will be considerable resistance on the part of even other aldermen to letting something like this happen in their own ward?
Well, Chicago has an unfortunate tradition of having government run without a whole lot of transparency, decisions made behind closed doors, decisions made secretly, decisions that are kind of a fait accompli by the time they're presented to the public. So I think it's going to be a little bit difficult in this city to embrace it. However, that's why this experiment in the 49th Ward is so important, because if it works, and I think it will, I think it'll, over time, have other elected officials realize that it's really in their own interest to do it this way. There are some progressive members of the city council, I think, that would be interested in it. I haven't talked to them too much about it because, first, I want to see how it works here. I want to see if there's any tweaking we have to do to the process. I want to see what pitfalls that might be in place. But I'm pretty confident that, while there might be a few bumps on the road, that this is going to work out pretty well. And then ultimately, people are going to be very satisfied with the process and with the outcome. And then we're going to take the show on the road.
Someday it'll be a law. Okay.
That would be great, wouldn't it be?
You would be.